Oh, howdy, all. Grab yourself a beer. It's time for some Path of Exile discussion. So today, GGG dropped the Atlas passive tree full information, and I wanted to summarize it, give you my thoughts on what I think is worth picking, what jumps out at me as being the best nodes on the entire tree, and also some thoughts on a potential passive tree that you might want to consider starting with. This is sort of what I'm thinking of starting with. I may be convinced out of it. I might be convinced to change it in certain ways, but this is where I'm thinking of going, and this would be for a fairly powerful mapping character that's capable of doing light bossing. So you're blitzing through tiers 14 to 16 maps, but the sort of build that doesn't have a cruisy time with the Shaper and the Elder and really struggles with Uber Elder. If you're playing a build like that, then the passive tree I'm going to outline at the end is designed for you. If you're playing something that's a more dedicated bosser, we'll go over some of the modifications you might want to make. So firstly, all nodes cost the same, one passive point, but some nodes are more equal than others. There's a small number of nodes that are so good, I just don't believe that choosing not to take one of them can be justified on any Atlas setup. There's a larger number that are very, very good, but not universal, and some of them, for instance, are so good that every boss killing oriented character needs them, but map clearers can skip, and vice versa. However, Pathological is probably the best node on the entire tree. We'll get to talking about that a bit more now. So Pathological means that every map that you find has in maps that are created on your Atlas, have a 3% chance to have 1 to 5 layers of Delirium. Now, 3% doesn't sound like much until you realize just how many maps drop over the course of a league. If you drop 3,000 maps over the course of a league, this is going to augment 90 of them, and those augments are going to be 1 to 5 Delirium Orbs. It feels like an average of 2.5 to 3. So if we say that it is 2.75 average, then that's like getting an extra 200 and something Delirium Orbs over the course of the league. This is mandatory on all trees because it is just more powerful than everything else. If you're a bosser, you take Pathological. If you're a mapper, you take Pathological. If you're farming low tier maps, you take Pathological. I would pay 15 points for this. It costs 5 because it's got 4 prerequisite nodes that you're going to need to take to grab it. It is just that good. Next, there's a number of other must-take nodes that aren't quite as good as that. So I think that all mapping and bossing characters take Pathological, like we've already said. All characters that are running tier 14 plus maps, whether it be a bosser or a mapper, I think you need to take the Synthesis cluster and the Shaper and Elder cluster. The reason for this is that these will empower the boss drops that you get from those maps by granting either a 4% chance to get a Shaper Guardian map and a 4% chance to get an Elder Guardian map for the Shaper cluster, or a 1.5% chance to get a Synthesis unique map from the Synthesis cluster. This applies to all your tier 14 plus maps, and it's just too much of a cumulative bonus, given that those maps are quite a bit better. They're quite a bit more valuable, they're quite a bit rarer, they drop some special loot, they're really good. So if you're running tier 14 plus maps, you need to take those, they're just better than any other choice. Alternately, if you're not running tier 14 plus maps, then you skip those. All mappers should take the Sexton and Scarab clusters, they're really good. All bosses should take the Maven cluster, the Exarch cluster, and the Eater of Worlds cluster. Now, the Searing Exarch and the Eater of Worlds clusters, we're not absolutely certain they're going to be as good as we think they might be now, so let's play with them and find out, but for starters, definitely take them. I recommend for mappers, for the same reasons that I recommended Pathological before, I recommend you take Spores on the Wind, but Spores on the Wind is lower power. Spores on the Wind is a Blight-themed mechanic, and it's going to give you a fair boost because it's going to augment all of the maps that drop. But it doesn't augment them as much as Pathological does, so it's not essential. Oh, and how convenient. Almost all of these are at the top of the tree. So we're going to keep that in mind when we're designing our tree. We probably want to get towards the top. So let's talk about some of the clusters that stand out. Firstly, the Scarabs. The Scarab cluster is so good that I'd pay 12 points for it. It costs 5. Small nodes are great too. Take it. That's all there is really to say about this. 10% chance for your map device not to consume Scarabs is amazing. 4% chance for map bosses to drop an extra Scarab, and the way it's worded, it might be map bosses, it might be every single unique monster in the map. Either way, that's a modest boost from the small nodes, but then you get this huge bonus of a 10% chance not to consume Scarabs. If you're playing a mapper, you take this cluster. Supplication is next, and this is I don't know if this is a must-take node or not. So Supplication causes areas to contain an additional shrine. Shrines have dense packs of monsters around them, and I kind of feel that this might be really good, but I'm not sure on that front. And so I want to play with it a bit to find out. So this is something that I think this is probably going to be so good you want to take it. And it's something you can take really early because it's close to the start. But I'm not sure on that. So I'm going to say quite openly that I don't know if this is as good as I think it is. My initial plan tree doesn't actually have room for it, but it's something that I would like to fit in later. Next, something that gets asked a lot, how do you respec these? Kirak has a new recipe of vendor recipe, a new vendor trade in that's available. You give him 2 Orbs of Regret, he will give you 1 Orb of Unmaking. An Orb of Unmaking is an Atlas respec point, just like it is in the game now. The difference is that they are going to be available, they're going to be much more available than they are now. The moment they're quite rare, in 3.17 they're going to be common. So experiment, but still take all of the S tier nodes, but just, take whatever you want for the lesser nodes. Play around, confident that you can undo any decisions that you make reasonably easily. So let's talk about the early game greats first. Shaping the Mountains is an example of a node that adds plus tiers to your map drops. So maps dropped in areas have 15% chance to be 1 tier higher. Early on in your map progression, you need to go from having 0 maps to having a substantial pool of them. During this phase, Shaping the Mountains and its other similar related nodes are going to be fantastic. On the flip side, once you actually finish out all of your core atlas, you're going to have more maps than you know what to do with. And at that point, you probably don't gain very much out of these. So this is fantastic as an early game great. This is also true of anything, including travel nodes, that give a percentage chance to drop an adjacent map on Bosskill, as that will give you a lot of help with filling Atlas holes. Additionally, Kirak missions will help a lot with holes in your Atlas and will be fantastic early on. Essences. Essences look at least as good as they were in 3.16, 3.15, except for the fact that there's not a Kirak mod available on the map device to add more essences. But there is fantastic support for essences on the passive tree. These are going to be excellent early and in SSF. They may eventually hit a point where you want to respec out of these in Trade League, but it's fine to keep them too. They will just add a bunch of extra juice to your maps passively. You won't need to think about it. You'll just be running a map and you'll be like, oh, cool. That's an essence with a shrieking thing on it. Oh, and it's been duplicated by that other thing. So you'll get a lot of benefit out of essence overall. Next, I want to talk about master missions. So there are 2 types of nodes that are related to master missions. There are mission replenish ones. These are really good to take early, and you'll want to keep them spec'd for a long time because they will give you a benefit whether you are focusing on that master then or not. The second one is ones that boost missions as you're actually using them. So these are good late. And Artifacts of the Vaal is in an interesting place where it does both. 3% chance to give you an additional master mission on completing the map, but also Incursion Architects in the areas are dropping more loot. So Artifacts of the Vaal is actually on the hybrid between both of these categories, but most of them fall clearly into one or the other. So you should take replenish nodes early for your favorite master or masters, and then respec into the boost when you have sort of 20 plus master missions saved of that type. And you can possibly spend all 20 of your master missions in a row, then respec your Atlas into something else again. Next, I want to talk Strongboxes. These are excellent early and in solo self-found. Tamper-proof is fantastic for providing early 6 links. And this is something that's going to matter a lot more in 3.17. There's no tainted fusings, and there's also no exotic goods providing a large number of 6 links. So really the best places to get 6 links will be from Vaal side areas, which you can spec into via the Atlas if you want, and from tamper-proof Strongboxes, and also from Heist. They're going to be the 3 best places, plus anything that is provided by the new content. So the Arch Nemesis expansion might have something, but in terms of things we know about, it's tamper-proof and it's Heist are going to be the best places. As well as that, there's divination cards for 6 links like the Dapper Prodigy you can consider, but Strongboxes are one of those solutions. Additionally, there is a new Strongbox type, the Scarab box, the operative box. This is tied to Secret Operations, which is a new passive, and we'll have to find out details of that. If it's as good as I'm thinking it is, it may actually be a truly extraordinary mod and may actually be an S tier Atlas passive, but for the moment, we don't know. We're going to have to find that out. If it turns out that the Scarab boxes contain 1 Scarab by default, then that's neither here nor there. Even with them being 6% with them being in 6% of your replacing 6% of your Strongboxes. But if it turns out that they drop 6 Scarabs by default, and then this can be rolled further by various mods on them, then that's going to make them amazing. Next, Harbinger. Harbinger is as good early game as it was in 3.16, but it has less top-end scaling because the option of applying an Auspicious Watchstone is gone and nothing replaces it. Run Harbingers if and only if you enjoy them. I think they're pretty good. They're in a good place where they're a strong choice, but they're not so good that people should feel pressured to run them when they don't, when they're not finding them fun. It does work well with Beyond when we get to the point of talking about Beyond. So there's quite a bit of Harbinger support, and it's all over the Atlas in a bunch of different places. And so if you can make it fit into your passive tree, then definitely give it some thought, especially if you like that content. So now I want to talk about some late game powerhouses. Some things that are just hard to use early, but very, very good late when your character is super powerful and is able to destroy entire screens at once. So firstly, let's talk Beyond. Scent of Blood and Torn Veil. These nodes are near the top left of the tree. They do a lot together. So Scent of Blood grants additional chance for you to attract monsters from Beyond. Torn Veil reduces the number of monsters you need to kill near each other in order to conjure Beyond portals. These multiply the effects of all other effects that add monsters to maps. So Scent of Blood and Torn Veil together will provide a large multiplier if you can force a lot of extra monsters onto a map through the use of whether it be Abysses, whether it be Harbingers, whether it be Blights, whether it be Breach, whether it be Legions. All of these sorts of things will add a lot of monsters on, and Scent of Blood and Torn Veil will then multiply those monsters indirectly through spawning a lot of Beyond demons. Now, you don't want to take these early because they will make maps too hard, but you do want to take them when your character starts getting more powerful. So this is really great with anything that spawns a large number of monsters in one place. So let's talk Abyss, Blight, and Legion, which are the three ways of spawning lots of monsters on a map that I feel have good support here. For Abyss, I am talking Abyssal Army, which is the node that grants more monsters and more XP from Abysses, not the Abyssal Depths and the Lich nodes, which are okay, but not uber, and they don't have any synergy with the Beyond stuff we're talking about. So take Abyssal Depths and Lich nodes if and only if you find Abyss content particularly fun, whereas the Abyssal Army, I think, is something that's so compelling to use. You might want to use it along for its synergy with Beyond, even if you're not usually someone that likes Abyss content. So all of these options work really well with Beyond. All of them also work even better with Scarabs that allow a razor focus on one type of content. So Abyssal Army, Torn Veil, Scent of Blood, and Gilded Abyss Scarabs is quite a combo, especially if you can add to that Sextants very late game that add even more Abysses. Now, solo self-found players can't sustain Scarabs, so what's the solution here? The solution here is to spec into Beyond and keep it. When you have 10 Abyss Scarabs saved up, then spec into Abyss. Then unspec from Abyss and spec into Legion. Use up all of your Legion Scarabs. Then unspec Legion, spec into Blight. Use up all of your Blight Scarabs. Now unspec Blight and just go back to something else. That's going to be your best strategy in solo self-found, I think, for taking advantage of the power of Beyond in this league. And for Trade League players, you just want to spec Beyond and then add your favorite from the other three. So whether that be your favorite of Abyss, Blight, or Legion, whatever that happens to be. And then sustain the Scarabs you're going to need for that mapping strategy by trading. Chances are that if you're someone who really likes Legion, you can find someone else that really likes Blight. You're going to find a lot of Blighted Scarabs while you're mapping. You can then go and trade them your Blighted Scarabs at whatever the fair market rate is, and they can give you their Legion Scarabs at whatever fair price is. And that's something that will end up making both of you happier, and it will work for both of you. So you can do that, and that'll be something that will help you both progress effectively along different versions of the same strategy. So Breach. In theory, the same strategy works with Breach, but it's my initial opinion, and I could be wrong on this, that the Breach nodes just look weaker in comparison. If you do love Breach, spec it, and Beyond anyway, I just expect that you would do slightly better running Abyss, Blight, or Legion in its place. And really, this was the case for Abyss for a long time as well. Abyss was in this place. Seems like Abyss and Breach have swapped around with the way that with the way that 3.16 worked out, actually. But 3.17 continues that. I think that if you like both Abyss and Breach content, go with Abyss because it's more powerful at the moment alongside Beyond. If you only like Breach, you can still run it. And also, you might be able to get your hands on cheaper Breach Scarabs as a result. So Expedition's next. Expedition's really good. Expedition has some fantastic support on the tree. And Expedition had the single best nodes on the tree in 3.16. And I think many of them seem just as good now. Also, ROG is going to be better in 3.17. This isn't due to ROG being buffed. This is just due to uninfluenced, well-rolled items becoming better. This is also going to be true for Heist. Heist enchanted armaments, the chess pieces that drop there, are going to be better in the new world of 3.17, where an uninfluenced chess piece is more competitive than it's been in the past. So all of this is going to mean that the that expedition nodes on the tree are pretty good. If you like expedition, you can certainly do well by speccing into it. So there's a number of nodes near the north end of the tree that are an interesting hybridization between Bosskillers and mappers. So this is something where people who have a character that is specialized in killing bosses, but that is slow at just progressing through a map and killing trash monsters, can work really well with people who have a character that can just blitz through maps really fast, but that then has terrible boss DPS. At the extreme example of this, you could imagine the Bosskiller is playing Heavy Strike and is just having to donk every single enemy over the head with whatever weapon they're using, whereas the mapper is hitting everything with a wet noodle, but fast enough that it kills white and magic monsters in one hit and the rare monsters in 5 hits. So the mapper just blitzes through at lightning speed, but then can't really kill even the map boss quickly, whereas the Bosskiller is doing very slowly, but very slow, very steady progress through their maps. These players synergize a lot with each other in the 3.17 world. And that's because Shaper and Elder Guardian maps come from the cluster at the very top that you see in the background. Mappers will gain the most from it because they will be able to get to map bosses fastest, but Bosskillers will want it too. Everyone should take every node in this cluster. If you can't beat Guardian maps, sell them in bulk to someone who can. The Synthesis cluster is also really good for exactly the same reason and is a must-take. So getting an 8% chance to get a Guardian map from this cluster is amazing. A 1.5% chance to get a Synthesis map, which could be a Cortex, is also amazing, and those clusters, I think, are fantastic. Next up, I wanted to talk quickly about side content, and so Heist has fantastic support on the tree. Even if you don't like Heist, though, you can actually pick up a lot of loot that is basically stuff that is Heist entry tokens. Contracts, this is blueprints, this is rogue markers. Consider grabbing the Heist nodes so that you will have more blueprints and more coins to sell. Every time casing the joints 10% proc goes off, blueprints that drop in areas have a 10% chance to be fully revealed. Every time that goes off, that is going to be about an Exalted Orb that you've just hit with that. And even when you get a blueprint that isn't fully revealed, that's going to be 20C or so that you can sell that for. So getting more blueprint drops, getting more smugglers' caches and stuff like that is good, even if you've got no intention of even doing the first quest heist once. Harvest is still incredible off to the side content, and the harvest support on the tree is pretty good. Harvest is still in a very strong place where if you allocate everything related to Harvest, you'll have Harvest in 18% of your maps. So that means that every 5.5 maps you do, you will find 1 Harvest on average. Metamorph looks a bit weaker though. Metamorph feels like something that you would only take as a meme, or if it turns out that the Metamorph Scarabs end up really cheap. And if the Metamorph Scarabs end up really cheap, then maybe you will just go, you know what, I'm going to take Metamorph nodes on the tree. I'm just going to use these Scarabs that no one else wants because they will still give you some pretty good rewards. It's just that the passive tree support for them just isn't all that good. It's not as good as the other things. There is a unique maps cluster that adds 2 to the monster level of monsters found in unique maps. This is not as good as you think because plus 2 to level gives a lot less XP than it seems intuitively like it should. This is due to the interactions to the nuances of the formula that is used for diminishing returns on XP. Basically, above monster level 80, there is very little difference in monster XP and in the diminishing returns formula as the zone level goes up. There's almost no change at all, and so this is neither here nor there. The exception, however, this needs to be tested in game. It may be that this pushes Cortex's monster level up to 85 and Replica Cortex's up to 86, and this is going to mean that the Cortex and Replica Cortex will end up dropping considerably better loot throughout the entire instance. So if it turns out that that is correct, and this needs to be tested because we don't know which wins when there's a monster level override as a map mod and there's a +2 effect on the Atlas, but we will have to find this out. We'll have to test that. But if it does turn out that the Cortex and Replica Cortex are raised to monster levels 85 and 86, then that is going to be something worth seriously playing around with. Lastly, Val side areas. There's a node cluster that will cause Val side areas to be both more common and to also have a chance of dropping mortal fragments. I think that this is like a C tier node cluster. It's sort of okay, but it's economy based in trade, and I think it's something that solo self-found players might go for if they're desperate to fight Uber Atzri, but I would not bother with it if you're in a trade league normally. So what about Bosskillers? If you've got a specialist Bosskiller, meet the best nodes in your atlas. It's the whole top area, sort of above the text here. The area near the top contains the Searing Exarch nodes, which I think you're probably going to want to take, but we don't know enough about how they work yet, and likewise the Eater of Worlds. But it also contains the Maven nodes, and they are fantastic. You want to allocate everything in this Maven cluster, especially the +2 to the level of +2 to the monster level of the Maven's Crucible, which will also give you additional Maven Splinters when you do those invitations. That's going to be really difficult. You might not be able to do that until quite late in your progression, but it's going to be really impressive. And any bets, there is a challenge this league to defeat the Feared at monster level 85. So here's an initial tree I put together. This is the south half. This is based around in-map juicing from Beyond and Blight combined. I prefer Abyss to Blight myself, but with the pathing, it just worked better with Blight. This is using all but 5 points, and you would take the Searing Exarch and Eater of Worlds clusters last. So it's going to be pretty easy to get your first 100 points, but to go from 100 to 128 is going to take a lot of play. And this is a 123 point tree, and you'll be able to download it from just a tiny URL link later on. This is the north half of the tree, and there's a couple of things that are a little bit buggy. I do want to allocate this node. It's just not allocating because for some reason it's just not letting me allocate it. Likewise, there's one node off the top here that I'm not allowed to allocate for some reason, even though it should be able to. But that's the tree that I'm thinking of, and here is a link to it, which I will put in the... I'm not sure if YouTube accepts tiny URL links, so if it doesn't work there, I will put it on my blog, sirgog.com. I have no promises that this is optimized. It needs to be reassessed. I just think it's a reasonable starting point, and it's oriented to fast tier 14 to 16 mapping and light bossing. This means Shaper and Elder and down, so we're not going to be really specialized in harder bosses. If you were, there is no way you would miss this Maven cluster here. This Maven cluster is incredible. You would take it no matter what the cost was. Anyways, that's all I've got on that. May your Valorps have interesting results, and may you not use one on your Atlas, and I will see you around. Have fun, and enjoy your preparation season for 3.17.